Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, game changer, a major development in the fight against the coronavirus as the FDA grants full approval of the Pfizer vaccine, potentially opening the door for millions of hesitant Americans waiting for that official okay.
The moment you've been waiting for is here. It's time for you to go get your vaccination and get it today.
The fine print from the FDA and how this could mark a turning point as the Delta variant continues to spread. Chaos in Kabul, gunfire at the airport where thousands of Afghans are still anxiously waiting to flee their home country, now lost to the Taliban. Plus, President Biden facing pressure from G7 leaders to make a decision about that evacuation deadline set for next week. We'll bring you the latest. Tragedy in Tennessee, more than 20 people killed in catastrophic flooding, including twin babies swept away by the raging waters. A look at the aftermath, the search now for the missing, and how the community is coming together. And race for a rental, a reversal following last year's big city exodus. The problem facing renters now hoping to return as the housing market heats back up. I know that's true because last year you were able to score some deals the both of us did, but I know friends who are trying to move right now and it's crazy again.
The deals are gone.
Yeah, exactly. We'll bring you that story later. We begin this morning, though, with that news from the FDA granting full approval of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. Now it means more vaccine mandates are going into place for millions of Americans.
The agency granted that full approval for those 16 and older, saying the vaccine is 91% effective at preventing disease. Within hours of the FDA's announcement, more mandates did go into place, including at the Pentagon, CVS, the nation's largest school district, New York City, and university systems in New York and Minnesota. That's just the beginning. Full approval is expected to clear the way for more employers to issue vaccine mandates. This move could also boost the number of people who get the shot. Right now, more than 51% of Americans are fully vaccinated. Health experts hope a fully approved COVID vaccine will convince those who are on the fence to finally get the shot. We have a team covering all angles of the pandemic this morning. Jeff Bennett has the latest on the president's vaccine push. Yasmin Vasugian is on New York's Staten Island with reaction to mandates. And Dr. Kavita Patel is answering our questions on the vaccines and the current wave of cases. Let's begin with Jeff at the White House. So tell us, Jeff, what does the Biden administration hope will happen now? Do they expect an increase in vaccinations right away?
Yeah, that's the hope. Good morning, Joe. I think the Biden administration hopes that this gold standard approval, full FDA approval of the Pfizer vaccine, will be the thing that convinces the vaccine hesitant to finally roll up their sleeves and get these shots into their arms. As you pointed out, there 51% of U.S. adults are fully vaccinated, but there's still some 80 million Americans, for whatever reason, who have not even gotten a single dose of the vaccine. There are a good number of people who at least say they've been waiting on full FDA approval, and now it is here. You heard President Biden say yesterday, the day you've been waiting for is upon us. Here's a bit more of what he had to say to the American public about this full FDA approval.
Those who've been waiting for full approval should go get your shot now. The vaccination is free, it's easy, it's safe, and it's effective. And it's convenient. For 90% of Americans, there's a vaccination site less than 5 miles from your home, and you can get the shot without an appointment. So please, get your shot today. There is no time to waste.
And so where this country is right now in the life of the pandemic, Joe, is not at all where President Biden wanted us to be. You'll remember on July 4th, he had that whole independence from the pandemic gathering here on the South Lawn of the White House. And the expectation was that because the administration had effectively rolled out the vaccine, making it free and readily available to any American who wanted to get one, that Americans would do just that. But again, there are, tens of millions of Americans who have yet to do it. And so right now, what you see is a public pressure, a public messaging campaign from this administration, and then a number of vaccine requirements and mandates. The president saying that local business leaders and local state leaders should follow the lead of the federal government in doing just that, requiring Americans to get the shot where they can.
Yeah, so, more on that. We just heard the president really speaking directly to the American people. But what is the White House's message now to employers now that we have a fully approved vaccine? Is the president pushing employers to try and mandate vaccines?
Yeah, in fact, yesterday in those remarks, he said he wants local business leaders, state and local governments to follow the lead of the federal government. The federal government has already mandated that U.S. troops get the shot. The Pentagon was speaking about that yesterday. Now that there is full FDA approval for the Pfizer vaccine, to expect more guidelines on that. Nursing home workers, workers who work at long-term care facilities have all been directed by the federal government to get the vaccine. And as you mentioned at the start of the show, you have companies like CVS, you have New York State public service workers, all now required to get the vaccine. So certainly you can expect more of that to come.
All right, Jeff Bennett. Jeff, thanks so much.
Sure.
Now, some hospital employees on New York's Staten Island are protesting former Governor Andrew Cuomo's vaccine mandate for all healthcare workers. The protests come as Staten Island sees the highest infection rate of any New York City borough. Yasmin Basugian is outside Staten Island University Hospital. Yasmin, good morning. So first, let's just start with the current vaccination numbers there. So what percentage of the population is vaccinated, and what does that rate look like specifically among hospital staff?
All right, so you're talking about all of Staten Island in general, right? You got 53% of folks on Staten Island fully vaccinated, 59% with only one dose. If you're talking about the hospital behind me, for instance, they're kind of part of this big healthcare conglomerate called Northwell Health. 80% of employees at Northwell Health are currently vaccinated. We're actually trying to work on getting the specific number when it comes to the hospital behind me. But let's talk timelines for a moment, right? August 16th, the hospital behind me essentially said, listen, you got to get vaccinated. If you're not getting vaccinated, then you're going to be subject to weekly testing. And then former Governor Cuomo now instituted the fact that healthcare workers across the state have to be vaccinated by September 27th or face possible termination. That is somewhat vague, but I was actually talking to the folks here at the hospital that said, listen, if the state is saying that we have to terminate these folks if they are not fully vaccinated by September 27th, we are prepared to do so. And as you mentioned, there have been a lot of protests outside this hospital beginning on August 16th when they put this policy in place. Many healthcare workers, nurses, technicians, and so on and so forth saying, listen, we're not going to get vaccinated. And they continue to protest. We're going to be talking to some of those folks throughout the day here, Savannah.
Yeah, I know you spoke to one of them already, a nurse who chose to leave her job rather than get the vaccine. What did she tell you about making that decision?
I did. And it's interesting, right, because you had the FDA approval come yesterday for the Pfizer vaccine, full FDA approval at that point. And in my reporting over the last couple of months, really, since the vaccine kind of hit the market, a lot of folks have been telling me, listen, once this thing gets fully approved, there is a possibility that I'll consider getting this vaccine. So I think a lot of us thought we would come out here and there would be a lot of folks saying, listen, OK, now's the time I can get it because it has been fully approved. We're not necessarily hearing that as of yet. And of course, we're going to be talking to more and more folks throughout the day. This nurse, for instance, she's been a nurse here for 15 years. She actually said that she thought she was going to be able to retire here. She wanted to spend the rest of her career kind of giving her services here at this hospital. She is having some fertility issues, trying to get pregnant. She is worried about what this vaccine is going to do for that process. Now, I want to be clear about the science before I play her sound, that there's no science that suggests, and Dr. Patel can back me up on this, that these vaccines cause any fertility issues, even so far as to say that the CDC is encouraging and telling pregnant women to go ahead and get vaccinated. It is completely safe to get vaccinated. 200 million people in this country so far have, in fact, been vaccinated. That being said, let's take a listen to this nurse.
I am not like anti-vax. Like I've gotten vaccinated in the past. My child has gotten vaccinated up to this point. This one specifically, I just feel like there are no long-term studies. I'm not opposed to it in the future. And I've told my doctors I'm not opposed to it after possible pregnancy and giving birth. I'm not opposed to it. We're supposed to protect our children. So God forbid I got pregnant and I took the vaccine and something happens to this child, I will never be able to live with myself. Like I will blame myself for the rest of my life. And I can't do that.
And I just want to reiterate, there is nothing that suggests that these vaccines put any type of pregnancy or fertility in danger. Again, many pregnant women across this country have been vaccinated, have gone on to have healthy children, are currently healthy themselves. But nonetheless, that is some of what we are hearing, especially from a woman like that who's been a nurse here for 15 years and facing fertility issues. That is a choice that she is making. And she says she's ready to be terminated if, in fact, that's her fate.
Yasmin, you said it. There's not the science to back that up, but that is a concern. I've been hearing it as well in reporting. So thank you for that sound. And as you said, we'll have Dr. Kavita Patel be able to kind of walk us through that. Yasmin, thanks so much.
So let's bring in NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Kavita Patel. Your name has been called out here. So let's start right there. I mean, first of all, a couple of questions based on Yasmin's reporting. The hope was that full FDA approval would encourage hesitant Americans to get the shot, especially the healthcare workers who'd been arguing they didn't want a vaccine under emergency use authorization. Well, now here it is. It's fully approved. You're still seeing some healthcare workers protest, like some of those in Staten Island, saying, no, we still need more time to research this. So your reaction to that, do you think FDA approval will change some minds?
I do, Joe. Good morning. I do think FDA approval will change some minds. Unfortunately, Yasmin hit on, and Savannah touched on it, a very compelling narrative that is false. We actually now have accumulating data. In fact, Joe, that if you actually get the vaccine, there's even better outcomes potentially, not just for infertile women, but for pregnant women, because getting COVID is incredibly detrimental to a pregnancy and to potentially future pregnancies. So you're absolutely right that I think approval will help for institutions to continue to hold ground and put a mandate or keep a mandate in place. But as you heard, we're going to have workers and people who just decide to walk away. Those people are still going to remain unvaccinated, and there's still an important population that we need to get to.
The FDA is saying the Pfizer vaccine is 91% effective now against severe disease. Back in the initial trials, it was 95% effective. Here's what the CEO of Pfizer told Lester about these latest numbers.
We realized through the real-world data that after several months, there is a need for a booster, because that will continue providing you the high level of efficacy that you observed immediately after the second dose.
So given what we're learning about Pfizer's efficacy in real time, what do you think of these numbers? And do you think the millions of people who got the vaccine are going to need to continue to get more booster shots in the future?
Yeah, I'll attack that question first. I do think that boosters, just like for other series of vaccines, for tetanus, for example, we will need boosters in kind of the foreseeable future. How often, Joe? It does seem like it's happening. You know, you get your first series around months 1 and 2, and then a booster 6 to 8 months later. That fits with other kind of vaccines that are for viruses or based on viral diseases. Number 2, kind of your first question about, what about these numbers? None of us are shocked. 91%, 93 to 95%. A lot of that had to do, by the way, Joe, with how controlled in the clinical trial setting the mitigation measures were. Remember, the trial's initial data were conducted when we didn't even have the Delta variant. So I think the CEO touched on the fact that, of course, with time and accumulating data, we saw more and more variants, and the immunity decreased, as he mentioned. So I'm not troubled. In fact, the 91%, I'll be honest, has really shown that these mRNA vaccines hold their own, again, against death and hospitalization. They're working, and I hope that's even further proof, along with approval, for people to get vaccinated.
Absolutely. Dr. Kavita Patel, always on call to answer our questions just like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The White House is pushing nursing homes to require vaccines for workers, with President Biden even announcing he will have the Health and Human Services Department look into any regulations to make that mandate possible. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck reports.
Sissy Sanders worries day and night that her mother will contract COVID in her Texas nursing home, where a quarter of staff members are unvaccinated.
There's no way you can social distance with the resident. You are changing them, you're feeding them, you're helping them brush their teeth.
Over a 3-week period, COVID cases in nursing homes across the U.S. have skyrocketed 142%. The national staff vaccination rate is 60%. Sanders fears lockdowns are next.
Can you go through that again? No, I can't go through that again. But more importantly, the people who can't go through it again are the residents.
President Biden's recent pledge to mandate vaccine for staff in care facilities will impact nearly 15,000 nursing homes, including the one where Sissy Sanders' mother lives. While that facility's parent company doesn't have a mandate, it says it has made staff vaccination a priority. Scott Crabtree, who runs the Lambeth House Care Facility in New Orleans, put in a vaccine mandate last fall.
Did you have any hesitations about losing your staff? Not really. We made that decision because it was the right decision.
While 10 staff members quit over the policy, some have since returned, vaccinated. The facility hasn't seen a single resident COVID case in 17 months.
They deserve to have the best quality of life at the end of life possible. Vaccine is it.
Some say a vaccine mandate should apply to the whole healthcare industry, not just nursing homes. Dr. David Gifford is the chief medical officer for the American Healthcare Association.
Do you worry if people are unvaccinated that they'll leave nursing homes and just go to a different type of facility?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of hesitancy, and if we can't get enough workers, it'll be very hard to care for residents.
Sanders fears the return of dark days when families were forced to say goodbye to isolated loved ones.
I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to let that happen to my mom.
Katie Beck, NBC News, Austin, Texas.
Breaking news this morning out of Afghanistan. NBC News has learned that CIA Director William Burns held a secret meeting with the de facto leader of the Taliban yesterday. That's according to a senior diplomat in the region and another source familiar with the matter. U.S. officials view him as someone who can be negotiated with, having previously served as the group's chief negotiator in peace talks with America. No word on the specific topics of their talks. But this comes amid chaos at Kabul airport as thousands are still trying to leave Afghanistan. The White House says progress is being made. More than 21,000 have been evacuated in the last 24-hour period. Desperate Afghans are trying to flee the country ahead of a looming deadline. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley reports from Ramstein Air Base in Germany, which is welcoming Afghan refugees.
Good morning, guys. Well, we're far away from the drama and the continuing danger in Kabul, but this is one of the final destinations for a lot of those thousands of Afghan evacuees who are trying so hard to get out of Kabul right now. They're coming here to Ramstein Air Base in southwest Germany. This is actually one of the largest American communities outside of the U.S. borders in the world. It's a long-standing air base, and this is where people are stopping before they move on either to the United States or other third countries. And we were there yesterday. We spoke with some of these thousands of Afghan evacuees, and once they arrive here, they're processed, they're given COVID tests, they're given food and water and temporary shelter, and some of the members of this sprawling military community are actually volunteering on their own time. And that's not just active duty soldiers, but also their children, their spouses, to help these Afghan refugees. And the same sort of images that you're seeing inside the U.S. with so many people coming forth with help, with products to help these people who are arriving there. And so this just goes to show the solidarity of the military community here in Germany. But at the same time, we spoke with some of these refugees. They are not happy. They're very upset with the way they've been treated, specifically by the U.S. government. A lot of these people are passport holders. They're U.S. citizens, and some of them told me that they feel abandoned by what's going on. Now, the latest we had from last night, just to give you a sense of the backlog that we're seeing here, the latest we had from last night was that 39 planes had arrived here at Ramstein, but only 2 so far were confirmed to have left. Now, of course, those numbers are changing as we speak. And they will likely change throughout the day. But there's a lot to be done. So a lot of these Afghan refugees, when they arrive here, again, they're not wanting for anything like food, water, medical care, or shelter. But what they have a severe lack of is information. And some of the people that I spoke with said that they still don't know when they're going to be leaving or where they're going to be leaving to, even when they're U.S. citizens. And that's part of the frustration that we're seeing here at Ramstein Air Base, even when these people have managed to make it this far and managed to make it to safety. Guys?
The G7 world leaders are holding a virtual summit today to discuss the crisis in Afghanistan. High on the agenda is that August 31st deadline for evacuations. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and other leaders hope to convince President Biden to extend it. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was pressed on the issue at the White House yesterday.
We are also consulting closely with our allies and partners on the issue of the evacuation and its progress. We are taking this day by day. We believe we are making enormous progress. We are engaging with the Taliban, consulting with the Taliban on every aspect of what's happening in Kabul right now. We'll continue those conversations with them. Ultimately, it will be the president's decision how this proceeds, no one else's.
NBC News global correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now from London. So, Raf, President Biden is facing pressure to push back that deadline while the Taliban is warned of consequences if the deadline's extended. Is it likely that we'll see that date pushed back today?
Joe, good morning. That is the question Boris Johnson and his team are asking behind that black door as they prepare to host this emergency G7 summit. Can President Biden be convinced to keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan beyond his August 31 deadline? The Brits and other European allies are hoping he will. That would allow more time for evacuations. The reality is the European troops who are on the ground in Kabul cannot stay there without American support. So if the Americans go, they will have to go also. Now, the British Defense Secretary said he is not particularly optimistic that the president can be convinced, but that the UK and other European allies will make that case to him today at the G7. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I think it is unlikely. Not only because of what the Taliban has said, but also if you look at the public statements of President Biden, I think it is unlikely. It is definitely worth us all trying, and we will. And we've also changed internally within our own military system how quickly it can take for us to get out, because for every hour we can squash the military evacuation is an hour we can add on to help the civilian evacuation.
Now, the Taliban have said they will not accept any American presence in Afghanistan beyond August 31. The question is, would they follow through on that threat? There are some reasons to be skeptical. The Taliban have been very patient for 20 years to get the Americans out of the country. They know that they're leaving now. Would they risk a confrontation with the U.S. military in these final days? That is one of the questions that intelligence agencies are trying to weigh up. Joe, we are going to hear from the president at the White House later today, and we may get a better sense of his thinking then.
So, Raf, what else is on the agenda? Is the G7 likely to take any tough stance on the Taliban and impose sanctions, or could they even officially recognize the Taliban? What would we expect?
I think it's very unlikely we're going to see them recognize the Taliban today. I think today is about deciding what are the carrots and what are the sticks that are going to govern the relationship with the Taliban going forward. Everybody accepts the Taliban are in control of Afghanistan now. The question is, what can the West do to incentivize good behavior and to punish bad behavior? Because the reality is there has to be some kind of relationship going forward. Both sides have things that the others want. The West needs from the Taliban a safe evacuation over the next week or so, maybe a little longer. It wants some kind of guarantee from the Taliban that Afghanistan will not be a safe haven for terrorism as it was in the years before 9/11, and it wants some kind of commitment that the Taliban will respect human rights, especially women's rights. The Taliban, for their part, they are going to need humanitarian aid in Afghanistan, especially as the winter closes in, and they want, above all, international recognition so they are not isolated going forward. Jeff?
All right. Raf Sanchez reporting from London. Raf, thank you.
Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has declared a state of emergency after historic rain this past weekend caused flash floods that overturned cars, carried homes down streets, and killed at least 21. Residents are now seeking shelter in a local community center, and flood victims are helping each other. 2 of those lost were 7-month-old twins. Here is their father on those last moments.
I had my twins like this, kind of grasping onto my 1-year-old. And when the water hit and the room filled up, and that's when I lost them. I lost all of them.
NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson is there in Waverly, Tennessee, about 75 miles west of Nashville. Priscilla, good morning. Obviously, just so tragic to hear about this. And I know that the floodwaters disappeared nearly as quickly as they came, but obviously so much damage and heartbreak left behind. How are survivors describing the moments that the waters rose?
Savannah, good morning. Some pretty harrowing stories coming out of here from people who were in their homes when those floodwaters rushed in. And when you see what the devastation looks like, it's not hard to imagine what that must have been like. You can see this house behind me. The entire front porch is out. It basically moved up off of its foundation, and that tree is what prevented it from going any further. But if you look a little bit further back here, that house actually made it all the way into the roadway, feet off of its foundation. And again, it was a tree that prevented it from going any further. But there was a woman actually inside that home when that water went in. She was in there for around 5 hours waiting for first responders to rescue her. And finally, they were able to get to her by boat. But these are some of the stories that we're hearing here today. And I want to play a little bit more of some of what we've heard from people. Take a listen.
Now I'm panicky, and you know, I never in my life seen that much water. I seen it on TV, and I thought I was blown out. I was screaming and hollering for help.
We could see these people on their porches, and I think in my mind that they thought they were safe, that the water was not going to get that high. But from what I've heard, it gushed at them, and we lost Miss Mary. She drowned in the process. She was our hero. She saved us.
And Savannah, what a profound loss it has been for people here. More than 20 people died in those floodwaters, many still missing, and officials here saying that these efforts are going to be turning from rescue to recovery. So we could see that death toll continue to tick up. Savannah?
And now, Priscilla, President Biden has declared a disaster there after the governor requested expedited help from FEMA. I mean, you mentioned, though, some people were waiting hours to be rescued. How are emergency crews handling the situation on the ground right now before federal help is able to arrive?
Yeah. Well, those crews are still searching for people. Meanwhile, state and federal teams have been able to get inside these neighborhoods and begin to survey the damage. They started doing that on Monday and will continue doing that today and throughout the week. As you mentioned, the president did approve that federal aid, and officials here say they're going to need it. Take a listen.
We're going to be overwhelmed for the next probably 30 days at least. We need help. We need solid help. We need to be cautious of who we're allowing to help us, but that's going to come from a lot of us that are coming in, and we ask those agencies that's coming in, report in with us, check in with us. Don't go just sort of kind of self-deploy, so we can help keep accountability and help us take care of our people on that.
And residents here are able to start applying for that aid today. They can go to disasterassistance.gov or call that 1-800 number on the screen to begin that process. I will tell you, many of the people we've spoken to here did not have flood insurance, so that aid is going to be really crucial for rebuilding their lives. Savannah.
Absolutely. All right, Priscilla Thompson, thank you so much for your reporting.
Let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Which means Bill Cairns is here with us. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Finally, a quiet morning across the country. Very hot, but at least we're not dealing with a lot of severe weather as far as hurricanes or storms and like that. Interesting. Well, here's the full track of Henri from when it made landfall to when it just exited the coast off of Cape Cod. And you actually notice where it crisscrossed? Right exactly where it made landfall. How interesting is that? It didn't really do anything on the second pass, but it's kind of unusual for the storm to do this. The whole button hook back in the Catskills and then heading now safely out to sea. So what's next in the tropics? As we head towards the peak of the season, which is in about 2 weeks, everything gets very active. This is when you expect to be tracking multiple storms. Thankfully, these next 3 areas of interest, none of them are heading at this time for the lower 48. So we got at least 5 to 7 days of we can catch our breaths and kind of just watch how things develop. And I don't think any of these areas of development are really going to head towards any land areas and cause a lot of problems. The one in the Caribbean, the Western Caribbean, is the one we'll watch closely to see what happens as it approaches Cancun and Cozumel. And then if it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, where it would happen after that. But again, that's at least 5 to 7 days away. I mentioned it's hot and it's going to stay hot. I called these definitely the dog days of summer. Everyone's just kind of waiting to see when we're going to get that first cool Canadian shot of air, and it's not coming this week. 38 million people are under heat advisories or heat warnings. The area in blue, the number numbers in blue is the temperature. The number in white is what the heat index will feel like. Look at New Orleans today, 112. Ugh. And then as we go into Wednesday, that heat is still on from St. Louis through the Midwest, and it's going to stay pretty hot in the Northeast this week too, guys. Look at D.C., 90s all the way out through Saturday. No signs of any of that beautiful, cool, dry Canadian air. It's air conditioning weather still.
Definitely.
Not fall. All right.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah. Coming up, Indigenous women murdered or missing.
After the break, in our week-long series, The Vanished, a look at how social media is helping get their stories heard and helping families connect with others who feel their pain. Social media is changing the way we talk about murdered and missing Indigenous women. Many people in the community are carving out spaces to share stories about loved ones and connect with others experiencing the same pain.
Yeah, social media is also being used to take action. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett has more in our week-long series, The Vanished.
I used to live on the Navajo Nation, and quite a few of my friends were murdered. There were 2 men and 2 women.
It's a statement many Indigenous women are familiar with, watching their daughters, women, and often LGBTQ+ youth go missing or turn up murdered. Deborah started this Facebook page in hopes of connecting those who experienced this loss.
When we started the page, that's when I really started to know like how widespread this was.
Social media now filling the gaps where cases went underreported in the media or often weren't investigated by law enforcement. Why is this necessary? Only about a quarter of missing and murdered Indigenous people cases receive any type of media coverage, according to an analysis by the Urban Indian Health Institute. And when there is coverage, it often leans on racial stereotyping.
They say, well, isn't she a runaway? What about sex work? Was she out drinking? All of these stereotypes that allow them to push us to the side and say our women and our children simply don't matter. And so what we're seeing is the evidence of institutional and structural racism, things that have become embedded in systems that say women of color are over-sexualized, that they deserve what happens to them.
Remember me. Now, viral videos posted by Indigenous creators and activists spread awareness, marked by a red handprint on their faces, or by using the song Remember Me by Native artist Fawn Wood. Some videos will include missing and murdered Indigenous people, or MMIP, statistics and historical context to raise awareness, while other users are sharing personal stories of loved ones they've lost.
I didn't really think that something like this could happen to me.
Rihanna's best friend went missing, and her body was found 3 days later.
I posted to raise awareness, mostly when she went missing. There was a fire here in Arizona, and they didn't have people looking for her. I had like one comment saying like, oh, she probably just ran away. And it was really hard to hear someone try and justify what happened to her.
Now, these platforms expanding beyond spreading awareness. People are using them to actually find their loved ones. Deborah's Facebook page became a national-scale search and rescue organization.
We actively investigate murders and missing, and we deal with law enforcement every single day.
Relying on donations from supporters, MMIW USA follows up on tips they receive via Facebook, phone calls, or emails. They'll organize search parties and will call in additional resources like dive teams as needed.
We have figured out where so many people were.
Often, law enforcement doesn't even acknowledge that there are missing persons that need to be searched for. 153 cases, most of them since 2000, according to the Urban Indian Health Institute. Abigail Echo Hawk from the organization calls it data genocide.
And when they eliminate us in the data, they eliminate the responsibility to fulfill those treaty and trust responsibilities. And one of those includes public safety. It's going to take the movement of not only the Native community, but all of those around us to say, this isn't right. Nobody deserves to have their loved one go missing.
Let's take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
NBC News correspondent Janice Mackey-Freyer joins us now. Hey, Janice.
Hey, good morning, Savannah and Joe. Vice President Kamala Harris is continuing her visit to Asia in Vietnam today, but much of the talk about China. In a major speech, the vice president said South Asian countries don't need to choose between China and the U.S. She also called out Beijing for continuing to, quote, coerce, intimidate, and claim the vast majority of the South China Sea, to which China's foreign ministry fired back, calling the U.S. a bully, saying the U.S. is selfish, even invoking Afghanistan and the messy withdrawal there in saying, quote, this is the kind of order the U.S. wants. The climate crisis has been blamed for extreme weather events all over the globe, heat waves, floods, hurricanes. Now, scientists in Germany believe that the deadly floods and heavy rainfall they experienced there this summer was made 9 times more likely because of climate change. They also say that the downpours were 20% heavier, according to the study, which uses evidence to suggest that human-made carbon emissions are the main cause of worse extreme weather. And in Tokyo, the Paralympics are about to get underway. The opening ceremony opening now. The event's continuing until September 5th. But Japan is still recording thousands of COVID cases every day. So like the Olympics, the Paralympics is functioning in a bit of a bubble. There are no spectators. There will be no chanting, no singing, but lots of coverage of the events on TV and streaming platforms. The events get underway tomorrow, 7 sports being featured, including swimming, cycling, and wheelchair basketball.
All right. Great with streaming, though, that they can get more coverage out there of some of these events. They're inspiring to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to see them. Janice, thank you so much. Coming up, a big courtroom win for transgender rights.
The ruling out of Illinois that could impact the entire U.S. Next.
Welcome back. Taylor Swift has once again lit up the internet. This time, it's because the Grammy award-winning singer has joined TikTok. She posted her first video on the platform showing the transition between 4 different albums. She captioned the post in part, "Lots going on at the moment," and promoted the pre-sale of the vinyl record of her album Red, her version that's coming out in November. Swifties may remember that she used the caption, "Not a lot going on at the moment," before releasing her albums Folklore and Evermore last year. So this might be a little Easter egg here. The TikTok has gotten nearly 1.5 million likes, in just less than 24 hours, of course, because it's Taylor Swift.
I was about to say, does she have like 10 billion views or something?
Yeah, like right away. It's like
that?
yeah,
She broke
boom.
whatever the record is for whatever.
Yeah, I know. Probably. I'm sure we might hear about that soon, yes. But of course, lots of followers, lots of likes, lots of views already. It's Taylor Swift.
Right, sounds good. Thank you. A legal victory for transgender rights could have a ripple effect across the nation. An appellate court upheld a lower court's ruling saying a Hobby Lobby craft store violated Illinois' anti-discrimination laws when the store denied a trans employee access to the women's bathroom. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos explains.
Megan Somerville, a trans woman, has worked in an Aurora, Illinois Hobby Lobby for over 20 years and has been denied access to the women's restroom since transitioning in 2010. Somerville filed a complaint in 2013 with the Illinois Human Rights Commission after she was disciplined for using the women's bathroom at work. It took until 2019 for the commission to rule that the company's policy was illegal and it violated the Illinois Human Rights Act. The act prohibits discrimination in Illinois with respect to employment, financial credit, public accommodations, housing and sexual harassment, as well as sexual harassment in education. Illinois' 2nd District Appellate Court has upheld a lower court ruling that Hobby Lobby violated Somerville's rights. If Hobby Lobby decides to continue appealing the decision, it could go to the Illinois Supreme Court and from there to the United States Supreme Court. The attorney for Hobby Lobby did not respond to NBC News' request for comment. Hobby Lobby did win a landmark Supreme Court case in 2014. Burwell v. Hobby Lobby decided that for-profit companies have some protections for religious beliefs. In particular, that Hobby Lobby didn't have to provide contraception as part of their health insurance coverage for employees, as the Affordable Care Act tried to mandate. Back to the transgender case. Somerville told Forbes, this is a precedent-setting case in Illinois because the Human Rights Act has never been tested this way in Illinois and actually in the country. This isn't the first case to challenge discrimination because someone is LGBTQ. In Bostock v. Clayton, the Supreme Court decided that a person could not be fired because they are transgender or homosexual.
In 2020 in America, it was still okay to discriminate against people because of their sexual orientation or identity. Well, now it isn't, because of the Supreme Court.
This case could take that decision one step further and question whether an employer can deny bathroom access. The controversy of bathroom access goes beyond the workplace. The bathroom bill, as it is known, has sparked debate in different public places: schools, parks, government buildings, and more. In North Carolina, Charlotte passed an ordinance August 9th that would protect residents from sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination in different public areas. It could be a turning point in a state that just 5 years ago blocked Charlotte from passing a similar ordinance. Somerville still works at Hobby Lobby, where she is the manager of custom framing. She now can use the women's restroom. It is unclear what the next steps will be in this specific case, but the implications of this decision on the state level could influence what cases the Supreme Court chooses to hear.
Coming up, they left the big city during the height of the pandemic, and now some of them are returning.
We've seen that ourselves,
Yeah.
but renters are finding out the hard way that coming back won't be cheap. How this is driving up the market. Next on Morning News Now. Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
CNBC correspondent Contessa Brewer joins us today. Hey, Contessa, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Disney is reaching a deal with its unions to require all union employees at Disney World to be fully vaccinated against COVID by October 22nd. The Services Trade Council Union, which represents about 43,000 cast members in Florida, says Disney's going to host on-site vaccine events over the next few weeks. And Disney already requires salaried and non-union hourly workers to get their shots by the end of September. Ford is doubling production for the F-150 Lightning because of strong early demand for the electric pickup truck ahead of its launch next year. Reuters reports that Ford plans to spend an additional $850 million to meet demand. Industry insiders have questioned whether buyers really would be willing to give up gas-powered trucks for electric models, but commercial customers are pushing for electric vans and trucks to reduce their carbon footprint. And Facebook is letting some users make voice and video calls from its main app on a trial basis as it tries to make it easier to place calls without having to open the Messenger app. Facebook spun out Messenger from its main app years ago, meaning users have to download it separately to make calls and send messages. Facebook has been trying to tie messaging together across all its apps, enabling it between Instagram and Messenger. They tried to do that last year. I just thought it was such a mess when they tried to separate it out that what happened with me, guys, is that I stopped using Messenger.
Yeah, I actually agree exactly with that. I thought it was confusing, too, to me that it wasn't in the same place, so I haven't been using it either.
All right. Sounds like they got to fix that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Contessa. Rent deals could soon be coming to an end. Major cities are seeing a jump in demand for apartments. That's because more offices are opening their doors again, pushing rent prices close to pre-pandemic levels.
And that increase, of course, is making it hard for some renters to find affordable housing. NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Rule explains.
Across the country, rents are rising as employers tell employees it's time to go back to the office.
I have a return to the office coming in September.
Sasha Minkowski left New York City at the start of the pandemic to work remotely from a farmhouse in rural Iowa. But now it's back to the city.
By the time that I was looking to move back, I saw an uptick in the price, and that's why I returned a little bit earlier to start looking, because I was anticipating a lot of people were doing the same thing.
And it's not just New York. In Washington, D.C., before vaccines became available, rent was down 12%. Now it's only 3%. And in Miami, rents are now higher than pre-pandemic levels. There are exceptions. On the West Coast, where the big tech companies are delaying return to office, rents are still lower. San Francisco down 20%, Seattle 9%. But in some cities like Austin, moving companies like Blue Whale have seen an increase in transplants, saturating the market.
Where are people moving from?
We're seeing people move to Austin from all over the country.
While that may be good for business, it's not great for renters. So what can you do if you're in the market for a new place to live? Experts say have your paperwork in order, so if you see something in your price range you like, you can make a move. In a hot market, you have to act fast. If you need to hire movers, ask for an off-peak delivery time to save money. And always be flexible. Stephanie Rule, NBC News.
Some good tips there. Coming up, the clock is ticking for millions of Americans facing food insecurity.
Up next, the push to expand federal food programs that are set to expire. Expanded food programs helped feed millions of Americans during the pandemic.
Yeah, but some of those programs are expiring soon, leaving families in limbo. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett has more.
People waiting in line to file for unemployment and to get groceries from a food bank. Images that have become all too familiar during the pandemic. But despite this, poverty is expected to drop this year.
It is a very surprising result.
An Urban Institute report projects a poverty rate of 7.7% this year, which a New York Times analysis found is a record decline of 45% since 2018.
The difference is not only the regular government benefits, but also all those additional government benefits, including the stimulus checks, the advanced child tax credits, and the expansions of the regular programs.
Many of those expanded programs related to food. The Urban Institute researchers found that the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP or food stamps, will keep 7.9 million people out of poverty this year. But as the country enters a new phase of the pandemic, the expanded food safety net is undergoing changes.
Well, the federal government is upping SNAP benefits. SNAP is formerly known as the food stamp program. In October, the USDA will increase benefits by 25% from pre-pandemic levels.
Advocates say the permanent increase to SNAP benefits is much needed.
We know that for far too long, SNAP just had not really kept up with the times.
But other programs are seeing their pandemic expansion sunsetted, like Yoni Yara's, whose Cherry Hill, New Jersey site is distributing more than 60,000 weekly meals, with lines out of the parking lot.
Wow, we've actually made a difference. Like, it's not a theoretical difference. We have actually made a difference for these families.
The site is funded by the Summer Food Service Program, giving out boxes with food for breakfast and lunches. As school openings remained inconsistent, the Trump administration extended the program to run the entirety of the last school year.
Thank you so much.
Now, the Biden administration is returning to its normal summer schedule, shifting the resources exclusively to in-school meals, meaning homeschooled students who were eligible under that expanded eligibility are going to be out of luck soon.
This is a massive equity problem. It is not inclusive.
The USDA said, quote, the school meals programs were never intended, nor are they authorized by Congress to serve children who do not attend school. The administration points families to other programs like SNAP, but paperwork can be a barrier.
I used to work for the federal government. I know bureaucracies, and I still couldn't navigate it appropriately.
Karen Cohen has 4 children. When her husband lost his job last spring, she said applying to SNAP was a 6-month back-and-forth paperwork process. By the time her husband eventually got back to work, they still hadn't received the benefits. In the meantime, they've been receiving the weekly food boxes.
If legislators don't find a way to extend this program, our food costs will become astronomical. We will always make sure our children are fed, but it will mean that we make choices about other expenses, some of which are essential expenses.
The USDA announced for the upcoming school year that it will reimburse students and child care centers for free meals to all students, regardless of their income. Maine and California will continue the universal meals even after this school year. Equity and choice is key.
One of the biggest barriers to helping people is that people don't want to identify themselves. They feel ashamed. They feel like they'll be judged.
We know that now that by making these programs more accessible, making them more adequate, and providing people that choice is a game changer.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.